So do we think this screen is big enough?
Can I move it to my house?
Yeah, exactly. We should be watching a movie, right? Come on in. So did anybody drive an EV that they really liked today?
Only for 400 miles.
400 miles? What'd you like? What'd you drive?
The BZ4X.
Oh, good. You like it? You're a Toyota guy?
Yes, I am.
Nice. Nice. Anyone else?
The Mercedes EQS, but that's only because I couldn't afford to buy one.
Yeah. Well, that's a good opportunity to drive them. You don't have to be in the dealership, right? And you get, it's a beautiful car, right? I mean, it's, pretty awesome. All right. My name is Rob. I'll be taking you through this presentation. So I tell you 5 things all new EV owners need to know about charging. So my goal is really to help people make a good decision, right, about charging topics relative to a new car, or if you're an EV owner already, help you maybe maximize that or optimize it so you can keep that battery as healthy as possible over the long run. Okay, who this presentation is for. So anyone considering their first EV, anyone who wants to become more familiar with the unique language of EVs, right? I mean, if you're just getting into EVs for the first time, there's a bit of a learning curve, right? Whole new language about these cars. So want to help you with that. Anyone who wants a refresher course on how to keep their battery as healthy as possible. As we know, EVs, right, the biggest cost factor are these batteries. And there are some very specific things we'll go through today that you can do to dramatically improve the long-term health of your battery, right? And then my little disclaimer, right? This information is all publicly available and kind of based on averages, right? So in other words, any one EV is going to behave a little bit differently than the next one, and the environmental factors, heat and cold, right, will change things a little bit. So everything we're talking about is kind of, the norm, right, or averages. So a little bit about me. So first of all, I'm an EV owner and enthusiast, right? So my wife and I, that's my wife over there. Say hi. It's Michelle. So we own 2 EVs. So my EV is the Ford Lightning that the Greek food truck was plugged into. So I'm providing power to that right now. So that's a whole separate topic that we're not going to get into today, but I'll stick around after this if you want to learn about, how some of these vehicles like the Lightning can be used to power your home or other things like that. But absolutely love that truck. It's fabulous. Had it for almost 2 years. And then we picked up a used Polestar 2 at the end of last year, and that's what my wife is driving. So we're a 2 EV household, and she absolutely loves that vehicle as well. I'm also on the board of the Oregon Electric Vehicle Association. That's the organization that put this event on. And also president of EV Charge PDX. So we're an EV charger installation company. So we specialize in level 2 charger installations, and that's all we do. That's our focus, right? So we're not like electricians, right? We'll do the electrical work, and once that power's on, they say, my job's done, have a nice day. So we, being EV owner enthusiasts, help kind of go that next extra mile to help get people up to speed and acclimated and all that stuff. So here's our agenda. So we're going to start kind of at the basic level, right? So charger and adapter types, the related charge rates associated with that, different charge types. Then we'll get into best practices for battery health, for keeping that battery as healthy as possible over the long term. We'll talk about effects of hot and cold temperatures on your battery. They both have different effects, right? And we just need to be aware of those and what steps we can take to kind of mitigate those issues. I'll talk about preconditioning. That's one of the things we can do with most new EVs, particularly when it's cold, to warm up that battery and optimize our charging. And then the last thing, why Tesla opening up their supercharger network is such a big deal. Very good for all of us non-Tesla drivers, right? Tesla drivers might have a different opinion, seeing a bunch of all non-Teslas at their charging stations, but for all of us non-Tesla guys, it's pretty cool. Okay, so starting at the beginning, we're going to talk about the difference between level 1, level 2, and DC fast charging. So I'll go through this relatively quickly because many of you are probably aware of what this is, but level 1 is simply using our household circuit. So easiest way to think about it, level 1 being, it's using a 120 volt circuit. So that's what's a regular household outlet, right? Level 2 is using a 240 volt circuit. So those are circuits, they're still in our homes, but that's what we use for a dryer or an oven or an induction cooktop. So not entirely different than those kind of circuits. So DC fast charging is different, right? Our home circuits are AC, alternating current. So DC is what a battery uses. So DC fast charging, that charger is providing DC power. So it's going directly to the battery without a conversion from AC to DC. So it's much more efficient, right? And that's how we can get faster charging speeds, more voltage, right? More heat as well. But that's where we get the super fast charging at those. Now let's talk just a little bit about the connector type. So across the top, right, level 1 and level 2, that's what's called a J1772. So that's just the standard. That defines the pin configuration. And that's what's on all non-Tesla cars, right? And then to the far right, under the DC fast charging column on top, you see that's the 1772 connector on top, and then the bottom 2 pins are what's used for the DC fast charging. So it's that combo connector on top, right, that is what we use when we're at a DC fast charger, which is different than what we're using when we're at home, right, with level 1 to level 2 charging. With Tesla, their design is a little bit more elegant, right? So on the bottom, right, that adapter, that connector style is used for level 1, level 2, and DC fast charging. So a little bit more efficient design. But really, that's the 2 primary standards. One in the middle is CHAdeMO, and it's very specific. The Nissan Leaf uses it for DC fast charging, but it's basically a dated standard, and there's 2 cars in the US that still use that. Everybody else is on these 2 standards. Okay, so what's more interesting about those connector types is how fast we can charge our car depending on what type of charger we're using. So with level 1, it's obviously the slowest. So this table, estimated BEV, so battery electric vehicle, so that's a full electric vehicle, right? If we're going to charge that battery fully, it's like 40 to 50 hours, so we're talking a couple of days to go from 0 to full charge. Now again, we're not typically going to be going from 0 to full charge. That's not what we want to be doing, but just to frame the conversation, to let you know how quickly that thing is going to charge. So for every hour, you get somewhere around 2 to 5 miles, most common 3 to 4 miles for every hour of charging. So pretty slow, right? Level 2, to fill up that battery, it's 4 to 10 hours, right? Or 10 to 20 hours per, 10 to 20 miles per hour of charging. So the best way to think of that, level 2, is it's easy to get a full charge or as much of a charge as I want overnight, right? So that's what the, one of the things the level 2, the convenience of level 2 is I can always charge for the next day, no matter how much I've driven that prior day. With level 1, there's a little bit more planning involved. And then DC fast charging, right? These are the ones out in the public, much faster. So you're going to get a full charge, in as little as an hour, about 200 miles plus, right, of charging in the same amount of time that a level 2 takes 10 to 20. Okay, and those are DC fast chargers are out in the public, right? So it's not impossible to install one of those at your home, but it's pretty impractical. Most people aren't going to do that. Okay, so That being said, the industry has now standardized on the Tesla connector, right? So Tesla calls it the North American Charging Standard. The official name is J3400. So it's the same adapter type that we saw in that prior slide. So all cars coming in 2025 are going to have that kind of a charging port on their car, right? Everybody else today, non-Tesla, uses the other type, the CCS type. So today on our cars, both of our cars, we use that CCS connector. And starting in 2025, then if I buy the same vehicle, it'll have the Tesla style plug. And there are adapters to go in between. So I wouldn't get too hung up on, gee, Mike, this car is not going to have a Tesla plug style for a year. I'm going to wait, right? There's adapters to go in both directions, so it's not a huge deal. In my opinion, I wouldn't use that as a primary, buying decision one way or another. Okay, so we're using these terms, level 1, level 2, DC fast charging. With level 2 and DC fast charging, there's quite a range in charging speeds within those. So just because somebody has a level 2 charger doesn't mean that defines by itself how fast that's going to charge your car, right? And the same thing applies to a DC fast charger. So with level 2, those can be configured and set up at all these different amperages, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, and 80 amps. So pretty wide range, and how big that circuit is will define, and the charger, of course, will define how fast your level 2 charger will charge your car. And so how do you determine that? So an installation company will, take a look at your panel. Can your panel support one of those bigger circuit sizes? All EVs have a certain rate that they will accept also. So they all have onboard circuitry, right? Gary was talking about this to the group that was here before. So there's what's called EVSE, EV service equipment, that's on the car, and that's what that limits how fast a car can charge, whether it's level 2 or DC fast charging. So not all cars can accept the same rate of charge. And so that'll also help determine how big of a circuit we would put into a home to help you maximize your charging, right? And then the size of your EV's battery, right? If you got a smaller EV, smaller battery in your car, then we have a little bit more leeway in how fast you need to be able to charge, right? And the same is true for DC fast chargers. Just because you're paying for charging at a DC public fast charger, it can be anything from a 50 kilowatt all the way up to a 350 kilowatt charger. So 50 kilowatt in DC fast charger world is old, right? Those are the first generation chargers. And if we're on a road trip, right, what do we want to do? We want to get there and plug in and charge as fast as we can, right, to get back on the road. So we're never going to look for a 50 kilowatt charger unless you have an older EV maybe, and that's as fast a rate as it will take. But virtually all new current generation EVs will accept, 150 plus kilowatts, right? So some of the cars like Ioniq 5, some of you drove maybe the Ioniq 5 out there, it will accept 200 plus, right? So for you, it's like look for a 350 kilowatt charger, because that'll give you the fastest charge when you're on the road, so you can get back out there. So DC fast charger is not, it's not a one size fits all. And then there are level 2 public chargers also. So if you go into a shopping center, right, it could be a level 2 charger. So again, it could be a very slow level 2 charger, especially if they're providing for free, right? So you just to be aware, right, that just because something's out there in the public, it doesn't tell you necessarily how fast that is going to charge. Okay, so what type of home charger is best for you? So you buy an EV, you're going to need a charger, right? Whether it's level 1 or level 2. So how do you make that determination? So it really boils down to your use case, right? So if you have EV with a relatively small battery, and I'm picking a random number, right, 70 kilowatt hours as being anything that size or smaller would be small, and or you only drive a few miles each day, or maybe you only drive it a couple times a week. In that case, a level 1 charger may be all you need, right? So if I'm going 10 miles and going shopping and I'm doing that every third day, well, level 1 is probably just fine, right? If, on the other hand, you have the bigger battery and you're driving more than that on a regular basis, then a level 2 charger adds a huge amount of convenience. So if we put this in my terms, so my truck is a 100 kilowatt battery. I'm out driving around all over town, daily, often 30, 40, maybe 50 miles a day. So I couldn't, survive on a level 1 charger, right? I could not, get that back up to where I need from a range perspective, if I'm only getting 3 or 4 miles for every hour of charge. But with a level 2 charger, no matter how far I drive in any given day, that night I can top up that battery, right? No sweat. So it's like, just like an EV is not right for everybody. Level 1 or level 2 charger is not the obvious, easy answer for everybody. It really depends on your car and your driving habits. Okay, so let's talk about the cost of charging just briefly. So with level 1 and level 2, obviously we're talking about charging at home. And therefore, it's going to be based on whatever your electricity rates are. So the example I'm using here is based on PGE rates and or PGE and PP&L actually. So most of the people in this area, right, are served by either PGE or PP&L. I know there's other utility districts. I just picked those two because they cover the broad, local geography. Both of those companies have tiered rate plans that allow us to charge off-peak hours at a nice discounted rate. All right. So with PG, it's called time of day. PP&L is called time of use. Same idea. And so these examples are based on, the first one is based on PGE, time of day, right? So getting the big discount, so charging after 9 p.m. at night. So using my vehicle, the Lightning, with a 100 kilowatt battery, so big battery, and if I charge it 75%, so 0 to 75 or 15 to 90, again, I don't recommend doing that. We'll talk about that in a minute, charging that big of a cycle. But just for the math, right, I wanted to do a larger charge. So 75% of that battery. PGE is 8.39 cents per kilowatt hour, right, during these, the best off-peak rate, $6.29. If I have a smaller car, like a Bolt with a 66 kilowatt battery, and this is on PP&L, their off-peak rate is 10 cents, right? So with a little smaller battery, so that's, just over $4.
How many miles do you get on each of those charges in that example from each of those cars?
How many miles do you get?
Yeah, how many miles did you get that 75% charge from each of those cars?
Okay, so the Lightning, I get 220 miles of range. So if 75% is whatever 75% of 220 is, it's like, I don't know what that is, 180 or, whatever that math is, right? So 75% of the Bolt is probably 200 mile range. I mean, it's a smaller car, right? So that, so again, 75% was just used because I didn't want to show, charging 20% is going to cost you this, right? I wanted to show a bigger charge just to show you what, if you had to do a more full charge, what that costs.
Over 100 miles for those amounts.
Yeah, so it's pretty cheap.
It's 10 cents right now, 1 cent, right?
It's 10 cents, yeah. It's
It says 1 cent.
it's per kilowatt hour, so it's yeah. So anyway, it's the rate is 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So when I did this formula, that was just the way that, right. So yeah, my apologies. So it's 10 cents per kilowatt hour, right, for PP&L.
I will move there if it's 1 cent.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's even better. That's a little too good to be true, right? Okay, the other thing to keep in mind with these tiered rate plans is what I'm showing is for charging during those off-peak hours, which is easy to do, easy to schedule, very simple to program that, right? So I come home, plug in at 5 o'clock, it won't start charging until 9 p.m. So that part's super simple. But when you sign up for these tiered rate plans, then you pay a penalty for like charging, for the benefit of getting this discount off peak hours, you pay a penalty during peak hours, right? So there's a trade-off there. So just as a, again, personal use case, right? We're on the PGE plan, and with 2 EVs, I get an email every month that says how much I save by being on the plan, and we could save as much as like $40 a month, right? Because we're only charging during off-peak hours. So if we were just did not sign up for that plan and just use the regular rate structure, I'd be paying 40 some odd dollars more a month, right? So overall, it still averages out, but again, your results may vary depending on how you use your energy, right? So
if you were to charge your vehicle, say between 4 and 8 in the afternoon, you'd be paying about 15 cents. So, roughly.
no, you'd be paying a lot more. So if you're not on the plan, if you hadn't signed up for that plan, their regular rate is like 15 cents per kilowatt hour. But when you're on this tiered rate plan, 5 to 9, you pay 41 cents an hour per kilowatt hour. But again, there's no reason to do that, right? It's super simple to program it, right? Either in the app or in the card to say don't charge till 9 p.m. So there's no, unless there was an emergency or something, I mean, there's no reason to charge during the peak hours. I mean, it's super simple to avoid.
But all your regular electrical things, your lighting, your refrigerator, those are all paying for it.
Yes, yes. So the only thing that we do really differently about, to kind of manage that is we might not run the dryer, right, until like 9 p.m. Because, you know, it's really your 240 volt appliances that really are your big draws, right? So we might, you know, program the dishwasher just to do the delay, right, and delay that, you know. But, you know, we're going to cook, you know, and use the oven and stuff during 5 to 9. I'm not going to wait till 9 o'clock to cook something. So, no, right. So it's like, again, so the other thing to keep in mind here is that with an EV, it will likely become your largest use of electricity. You know, a lower state of charge, down 20 up to 80%, for example. That'll take like 6 hours. So I'm pulling, in my case, 40 amps constant for 6 straight hours, potentially, right? So you don't run your other appliances. Even if you've got an induction cooktop, 50 amp circuit, you're not having that thing on for 6 hours, right? You're gonna boil something or cook something and turn it off. So this will likely become your biggest energy draw. So if you just do that after hours, right, and then just be aware of the other things and do what you can to shift your usage to off-peak hours, then, you know, you don't pay a big penalty. And also with PGE, the weekends and holidays are all off-peak. So you only pay the penalty for the on-peak hours Monday through Friday.
You have to sign up for that specially.
Yes. So PGE, time of day, you have to, it's an opt-in. You do sign up. So real simple to do. PP&L, if you get the, I'm getting diverted here, but with their rebate program, right? So if you buy want to put in a level 2 charger, both these companies provide rebates on their chargers, right? With PP&L, part of their deal is if you get their rebate, $500, I mean, why wouldn't you get the rebate, right? But they will automatically sign you up into their plan. PGE, it's optional, but PP&L, you're in it by getting the benefit of that $500 credit.
PGE's website also has some language that I just read that said if they did the math and decided that that was the wrong plan for you, they help make some amends with you.
Yeah.
Like they give you some refund or something.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. I don't remember what the exact, exact, you know, formula is, but okay. So cost by DC charging. So again, level 1, level 2, we're doing that in our home, so that's based on our home electric rate. DC fast charging is out in the public, and so that's going to vary completely, right? Depends on whose charger we're using and what the location is, and just all kinds of variables. So the number I'm using is 43 cents per kilowatt hour, and that's based on a Google search that said in the Portland area that's kind of the average cost. So I think it's pretty close, but again, that number is going to vary quite a bit. But the same example, 75% charge in the Lightning would be $32, and in the Bolt it would be $21. So just to give you a sample. And then most new EVs come with some amount of free DC fast charging. When we bought the Lightning, and this is pretty common across the industry, so they had partnered with Electrify America and included 200 kilowatt hours of free DC fast charging. So we charge at home, we drive around town, and plug in when we get home. So we hardly ever use a DC fast charger, and so I've not even come anywhere close to using my free hour, so I've never paid a penny for DC fast charging in a year and a half. So just keep that in mind if you're shopping for a new one. Just figure out if that's part of the package. With many manufacturers, it is. But anyway, just as a point of interest.
Is that hard to set up when you go to a charging station? Is it hard to set up the free DC charging versus?
No, it's like anything else, right? It's like you're telling your Ford, in my case, Ford Pass app, that's the Ford application. You basically sync it, right, with the Electrify America app, right? So once my free hours are gone, so that's called like plug and charge. So in other words, now when I go to an Electrify America DC fast charger, I plug it in, it knows who I am, it knows I've got free credits available, and it just uses that. I don't have to do a thing, right? Once my free hours are done, then I'll have a credit card tied to that account. I'll plug it in, and it'll just automatically charge my credit card. So so with each vehicle, that setup is a little bit different, and if you want to be able to set that up with multiple charging, manufacturers, then you might have multiple apps, So, but anyway, it's pretty simple. So let's shift gears here a little bit to how do you keep that battery healthy? So when I'm talking about battery, I'm talking about lithium-ion batteries, and that's what's in the vast majority of today's EVs. There are some exceptions, and we'll talk about that on the next screen, but the vast majority of them today are lithium-ion. So the number one tip, right, is to limit your charging to 80%. And to do this when you're daily driving, commuting, and on road trips when possible, right? So this is super simple to set up, and a lot of cars come preset to, stop charging at 80%. Applies to all types of charging, and it is, kind of reinforcement for this strategy. When you're DC fast charging, let's say you're on a road trip, and I'm down to 20% charge, it might take me 45 minutes, for example, to go from 20 to 80%, but then that charging session the rate of charge is going to drop way off after 80%. And it does that to protect the battery. So once we get to 80%, we're generating so much heat, right, or more heat, that if we didn't regulate the rate of charge, then we're going to begin to cause damage. And we're talking about, when we talk about these things, we're talking about long-term effects, right? We're not talking about you do it once and it's going to fry your battery, right? We're talking about hundreds of charge cycles, right, of these kind of practices. But the point is that the charging session is automatically going to derate after 80% to protect the battery. So it's already built in. You can't do anything about it. So if you're on a DC fast charger stop, you charge up to 80%, takes 45 minutes. If you had to charge to 100%, that last 20% might take you an hour and a half because it's charging so much slower. So if you can get to your next charging stop with 80% charge in your battery, then do it. Stop at 80%, it's healthier for your battery, and that allows you to get to your next destination quicker because you're not sitting there now, waiting for this now super slow charging session to complete.
So when you go on a vacation, do you charge it 100% at home? And then, or do you charge it 80% at home? If you're gonna go, let's say you're gonna drive, 6-8 hours, whatever.
It just depends on the route, right? So, and if we have to charge to 100%, especially when we're on a road trip, do it and don't worry about it, right? Because that's what you have to do. So it's like, we're not talking about you do something one time, right? If I eat cake tonight, right, my health is not going to fall off a cliff tomorrow. If I eat cake 3 times a day, it might, have a quicker impact, right? So to your point, and I'll talk about the public charging network here in just a minute, and it's much better than it was before. But I would plan your route. So I don't want to really probably drive more than 3 or so hours before I stop anyway, right? So chances are I'm going to pick a route that allows me to get there with an 80% charge. If that's not practical for where I'm going, I'll charge to 100% at home, and then be on my way. So it really just depends on your route planning. So route planning becomes a little bit more important with an EV, right, for that reason. But you just kind of do what you need to do based on your route.
I have one question.
Sure.
Do the DC chargers always charge by the amount of energy that you use, or is it by the amount of time that you are using their station? Or is it a combination?
Well, it's by the time. It's you're going to get whatever you get, right, from that charging station, and that's going to vary quite a bit. So.
You pay by the kilowatt, though, you don't pay by an hour.
Yeah, it's charged by kilowatts, right? It's charged by total amount of energy that you have.
So if you want to sit there for 2 hours, it wouldn't cost you that much more. It just takes a lot of time.
Right, exactly.
Some blog. But Tesla will charge you if you don't.
That's true, I've heard of that.
Well, so there's idle fee charges, right? If your car is fully charged and you leave it there so nobody else can use that charger, then they should charge you for hogging that charging station when you're not doing anything, right? So that's right, another, and that's different with every charger station. So the number 2 thing that you need to do, go ahead.
So we have a hole, and, the range is not huge. So should it be plugged in all the time? When, of course, we're not using it.
Well, again, this kind of goes back to use case, right, for how you drive the car. So it kind of depends on how many miles you're driving, but you kind of have to do what you have to do based on your driving habits, right? So should it be plugged in all the time? Obviously it's a level 1 charger, right? So it's a small amount of current. So it's not really a problem to draw that, much on the level 1 charger. Yeah, so battery health is no different, right? You should cap it at 80%, and you should charge in small cycles like I'm about to talk about. That's going to be better for your battery. If you're constantly charging it up to 100%, then you're not helping your long-term health of that battery.
What if you charge it to 80%, but you leave it plugged in? Like it doesn't go above 80, or you leave it plugged in extra time, does that degrade it?
No, I don't think that just by leaving it plugged in, because you're not really drawing much by just leaving it plugged in. So long-term storage, that's a whole different, topic. But the point here is that smaller charge cycles for a lithium-ion battery will significantly reduce long-term battery degradation, right? So rather than waiting until you're down to 20% or 15% of your battery state of charge, if I'm out and I drive 30 miles and I'm, come back and I've, used 15% of my battery, I'm going to plug in and top it up. So these smaller charge cycles over time generate less heat. In the battery, the chemistry itself, little crystals form, right? So the longer the battery charge cycle, these crystals, they grow, right? And then during the discharge, they shrink. And then during that shrinkage time, then they form these cracks, these little micro cracks, and that's what causes degradation. So we want to limit the amount of growth in those things, and we do that by small charge cycles. So again, all this is, when it's practical. So if most of us are driving around town, right, 10, 20, 30 miles, whatever, come home and plug it in and just top it up, right? So that is going to have, so the studies have shown it's like, over hundreds of charge cycles, right? If you do that regularly, the degradation is minimal, right? So if you do big charge cycles, it happens much more quickly. So
How do EVs pay their share of road tax?
they pay a much bigger registration fee.
So no matter how far you drive with your heavy vehicle, you don't pay any more road tax?
No, again, I'm not an expert on that, but I know I pay more for my EV registration than I did with a gas car. So I think they're trying to figure that out. What's the most fair way to do it between, with this shift to electrification. But yeah, I'm not really an expert in analyzing those two, But anyway, I do know I pay more for registering my vehicle.
About 3 times more, isn't it?
It was a lot more. It's like, I don't recall what it was exactly, but it's a lot more. But it's a one time. It's a 4-year registration or something, 2-year. Anyway, but so that's, I know that's the primary way, at least locally, that they're trying to make up for the road tax, right? Okay, so smaller charge cycles. That's the best thing that you can do to keep your lithium-ion battery healthy over time. Okay, so what else are there, right? I'm talking about being very specific about lithium-ion. The next category of batteries that are coming and are already in a couple cars now are called LFP, or lithium iron phosphate. So the difference is that they're less energy dense, so I have to have a bigger battery for the same amount of range. But they're less sensitive to heat, so we don't have to baby them as much and do these smaller charge cycles, and I can charge them to 100% without fear of degradation. So there's a trade-off there. They don't use cobalt, right? So that kind of solves a problem, because cobalt's hard to mine, and there's some ethical concerns around cobalt, right? So they don't have that in their chemistry. So Tesla has 2 of their models right now have LFP batteries. So that's the Model 3 and Y standard range. Model 3 and Y long range still use lithium ion. So because it's of the battery density, right? You can get more miles for the same size battery pack. Other manufacturers, Ford, Rivian, have announced that they will be adding models with LFP batteries, but just word of caution, right? Especially in the EV space, we see it all the time, right? The manufacturers announce something they're going to do, and they have the best of intentions, but sometimes that gets pushed down the road, right? So I'm not doubting that these will happen. It's just it may happen next year or maybe a year later, or who knows, right? It often takes longer than they would like.
So do you know with those Tesla models then, will they have the same rate of charge from 80 to 100 because they don't have the issue with heat?
They should. That's a good question. I don't know the answer specifically, but I don't think that they would be derated, right? If they have no issue charging to 100, then you shouldn't be penalized, right? You shouldn't be. So I would expect that charge rate would be flat. I don't know that for a fact, but I would make that assumption. And there's Tesla guys out there in the parking lot who would love to answer that question, right? Okay, so hot and cold temperatures affect these batteries in different ways. So heat is the enemy, right, of your lithium-ion battery. We've already learned this, right? That's why we don't want to charge past 90% or 80% when we can avoid it. So essentially, right, when that battery gets 80% full, it's harder for those electrons, right, to find their home, right, in that last 20%. Very simplified, I'm not an engineer, right, very simplified, right, description of that. And just as a result of, these cars trying to manage heat, on a hot day, you're going to hear the fans come on, right? So if you're at a DC fast charger, that charging station's going to be cooled. I mean, some of these new chargers have liquid cooled, cords and everything. I mean, heat management's a real thing. And you'll hear fans on your vehicle come on too, right? And all that's to regulate the heat. Okay, so cold temperatures, they're not harmful for the battery, but they degrade our range, right? They have a big impact on efficiency. So, and we've all heard the stories, right, about how much less range you have, if it's super cold. But it's not uncommon for these batteries to lose 30% or more of their range, depending on the temperature outside. So what can we do? One thing we can do is use heated steering wheel and heated seats, right, rather than the HVAC system. So if we think about it, a regular gas engine car, one of the byproducts of burning fossil fuels is it generates a lot of heat. So that heat can be repurposed and use it to heat the cabin. Well, we don't have that benefit with an EV, right? Generates a little bit of heat, but nothing like a gas engine. So it has to use the same battery that's propelling us, for energy to warm the cabin if we use it for that. So, so this is most relevant if we're on a long road trip, right? And there's some ways to mitigate that. So newer EVs, I mean, if your use case is somebody who's going to be going on road trips a lot, then you might want to look for a new EV that has a heat pump. So newer EVs have heat pumps, just like heat pumps for a home, right? They do their magic and they turn warm air out of cold air, right? So it will help with the efficiency. It's not like orders of magnitude better. It's an improvement, but it's not like it's like a night and day change or anything. And your charging session will take longer in cold temperatures also. So batteries kind of like to be in moderate temperatures. So if a super cold battery, let's say we parked outside and it's freezing or below, and we drive directly to a DC fast charger, I plug in, my rate of charge is going to be slow until that battery warms up a bit, and then it can accept a faster rate of charge, right? So these batteries just work better when they're at moderate temperatures. So something we can do on road trips specifically is use a feature called preconditioning. So what that is I can, when I'm doing my route planning, say I'm driving to Eugene, right, and it's a super cold day, I'll tell my car, it's like, okay, the DC fast charger stop is in Eugene, and so roughly 30 minutes, I'm not sure the right number, 30 minutes ahead of that stop, the car's gonna monitor the outside temperature and more importantly, the battery temperature, and it will begin to warm it up. So when I reach that charging station, it'll be at an optimal or more optimal temperature to accept a higher rate of charge so I can charge more quickly and get out of there, as quickly as possible, right? So that's, most important on long road trips, right? That's really where that is going to help us. Preconditioning is available on many new models, right? Many new cars. And you can also use this to warm up your cabin if you're at home, right? So let's say you're going to leave on an appointment. You need to be someplace at 8 o'clock, so you tell your car, I'm going to leave at 7:30 tomorrow morning, and I'm plugged into my level 2 charger at home, I'm talking about, right? So at 7:30 or prior to that, it's going to monitor the battery temperature, and it'll warm that up, and then more importantly, warm up the cabin, right? It'll get that nice and toasty warm. So it's using my home electricity to warm up the cabin rather than the battery once I'm on the road. Now, if I'm just doing regular commuting, it's like, I don't really care so much about the battery efficiency, right? Because if I'm going to use 20% of my battery and come home and plug it in, it's like, right? So it's really kind of not a thing. This preconditioning at home is really just for comfort, right? I'm a cold wimp, right? So I want to get into a car that's nice and warm if it's super cold outside. So that's the point of that. The number of DC fast chargers just got much larger, right? For all us non-Tesla drivers. So when Tesla won the connector standard, I won't call it a war, it wasn't a war, but everybody's adopting that standard. So what that means is that all non-Tesla owners will now be able to use the Tesla supercharger network. So for all of us non-Tesla drivers, that just means that the number of DC fast chargers out there, so when I'm planning my route, just grew by like 4x, right? So not only are the Tesla superchargers more reliable, I mean, if we think about it, it's completely vertically integrated, right? They manufacture it, they develop the software, they manage the payment system, they maintain them, right? In the non-Tesla world, that could be somebody manufactures it, somebody else deploys it, third party wrote the software, a different payment system, and another party who might maintain it. So what could possibly go wrong there? So Teslas are much more reliable, and now everybody has access to them. And to be fair, on the CCS side, that's getting much, much better. I mean, they've learned their lessons, they've taken their licks, so that's getting much better as well. But having this, so it has to be a version 3 supercharger. So Tesla's been deploying these for years and years and years, right? So there's version 1, version 2. So current superchargers are the ones that apply to us non-Tesla users being able to use them. But there's like already 15,000 of them in the US, and that's going up every day. Of course, we'll need to use an adapter, right? Because my connector style is different than the Tesla. So some manufacturers, so Ford is sending every Ford EV owner the appropriate adapter, right? So that's just a decision. Ford is the first one to negotiate with Tesla to open up the supercharger network. And they're just making that call. Every manufacturer is going to do something, whatever they decide to do. The adapters, they're like between $200 and $300. So nice little benefit to get one for free, but they're available otherwise. So I could go to any of these V3 superchargers and with that adapter plug in and use that today. And this is a tiered rollout for the manufacturer. So because Ford was the first one to negotiate this with Tesla, they got first access, and that opened up in like February. So now it's, I think, opened up to Rivian and GM and maybe others at this point. But I think pretty much all the manufacturers are going to be available to use that network this year. Again, you have to check with each one of the manufacturers if there's a car you're interested in to know when that is going to happen. But it's happening, right? That's the good news. Tesla does, yeah.
Are they going to adjust the V3 supercharging cable length so that way you don't have parking problems?
Yeah, that is an issue, right? I mean, the version 3 chargers, right, have relatively short cables. So it does cause a problem, or a challenge, I should say, right? So the Tesla charge port is on the driver's side rear quarter panel. So with Tesla, you back in there, and it's a relatively short distance. So some cars, right, that makes it a little bit more challenging. So with the version 4 superchargers, they're putting longer cables on. So in the interim, though, yeah, it's just a thing. You just have to park in a way that that works, right? So. Yeah, so some of these version 3 superchargers have that adapter built in, and that's what they're calling the Magic Dock. So it's pretty cool, but all it is if I, in the app, right, say I'm going to this Tesla charging station with a Magic Dock, and it knows that I'm a CCS car, right, not a Tesla car, then when I pull that adapter out, or pull the handle out, it's going to have the adapter already on it. If I'm a Tesla driver and I go to that same charging station, you pull that handle out, the adapter's not on it. So that's what's magic about it, is it will dispense the right connector depending on who you are. So there aren't very many of those right out there. So most of us will need to use an adapter if we want to plug our non-Tesla into a Tesla supercharger for the time being. Now all the manufacturers are going to be adding the Tesla port on the cars starting next year. So again, every manufacturer is going to be a little bit different, but at some point in the future, because this is now the Tesla North American Charging Standard J3400 is the standard going forward, then cars are going to just have that built in. So at some point in the future, a new car, we won't need to worry about having adapters, right? It'll just be all the same. But until then, using an adapter is kind of a small price to pay. Okay, so I appreciate all you guys hanging in here